Okay. So the first thing I would like to do is introduce people that clearly need very little or no introduction. And I want to thank Colin Reardon, the Vice-Chancellor, for coming to speak with us today. So a big round of applause, please, for Colin. Colin has also brought with him, and maybe not everybody knows, is Ross Williams, his Chief Financial Officer. So today's session is going to be chaired by myself and Nikki Perot from law, a professor in law, and the plan is for our event to take about an hour. Before we do that, I'd like to make a few housekeeping announcements. So we're not expecting a fire alarm, so if there is a fire alarm, there's a door behind you there and the fire door here. There's a small exit here as well, but that will be, I'll be running out that one. The other thing is, if you can put your phones on silent so that we're not hit by too many retweets, that would be great. And then I wanted to tell you a bit about the format for today. We have questions that were being submitted in advance by you. And we had about 70 or 80 questions, I think, in all. And various people have worked very hard over the weekend. People have been working very hard for the union over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And it's very hard for the weekend to try and skillfully put those together into about 11 questions. And various individuals have been tasked with asking those questions. So what's going to happen is we will, as the chair, Nikki will do it, we'll invite an individual to ask a question, then we'll invite the Vice-Chancellor to respond. If the Vice-Chancellor doesn't give a robust enough response, then we as chairs may invite him to elaborate on that, and then we will move on to the next question. As I say, I'm going to put a timer on this because I think we're very, very grateful for the Vice-Chancellor to come, but I think it's not fair not to have a time limit. So I'm going to put a timer on this for an hour, and I'm pressing time now. And I'm going to hand over to Nikki to get started with the first question.
Fantastic. Thank you again, and thank you very much, Paul. It's called upon, we've got a set of 11 questions, and the first one...
Into the microphone, nice.
The first one is from Sam, and he's a student in Share.
Katie Walters and I placed a petition over towards you expressing concern for staff and students alike during the strike. We've achieved well over 6,100 signatures, but we'd like to know why we never received a response from you.
Okay, yes, I'm sorry it's taken so long. You can hear me if I do this. I am sorry it's taken so long, and let me just start by saying that, you know, I do understand the impact this is having. I know that you staff don't want to be on strike. I know none of us want to be sitting in this hall having this conversation. You know, it's not a good situation to be in. I know that all your teachers and my colleagues are not trying to cause damage to your education. It's an unfortunate byproduct of the situation we're in. So, just having said that, I'm sorry it has taken so long, but we have now prepared a reply, which I think will be going out today, or at least very, very soon. So we are going to reply to that. We have been replying to emails from students. I haven't replied personally to those because there's just too many of them. I think it's 274, 275, I got one just before. But I have been trying as far as I can to reply personally to staff when they write me, and I might have missed the odd one. Obviously the numbers are much smaller by comparison, so I've managed to do that.
Are you happy with the response?
That's okay, yeah.
Okay.
What is the response?
Would you like to tell us a bit about what that response is likely to be, Colin?
Well, I think it will be along the lines that we're going to do everything that we possibly can, as we have been sending this message out anyway, everything that we possibly can to mitigate the effects and make sure that you don't suffer detriment, or that no student suffers detriment. I mean, obviously there's a limit to what will be possible to do, given the, well, it depends how long this all goes on for. There will be a limit, but we'll do whatever we can. And the idea is that we want to give you the chance to demonstrate that you've achieved the learning outcomes that you're supposed to achieve in your modules and in all your assessments, and we'll do our level best to achieve that. I know that everybody will want that to happen.
Okay, on that point, thank you very much. Can I turn to Natalie? Is another student from the School of Law and Politics. Natalie, where are you? Hello, Natalie.
My question is one we've all been asking for the past 2 weeks, and that is, given that our lecturers are not getting paid for the days they're striking, and we, the students, are not getting any refunds for the missed teaching, where is this money going, or where is it going to go? Thank you.
Okay, so we don't yet know what... Indeed, very good question. We don't yet know what the dimensions of this are all going to be, or what the effects of it are all going to be. But the default position is that the money will stay with the academic schools or with the departments that would then retain it. And I think we will then consider what we'll need to do to restore the position as far as we can. So that might mean there may be costs involved in doing what I was talking about before in terms of the students. But it's really difficult to say right now what that will be. So I think we need to wait and see what the outcome of all this is, and when it's done, we can then deal with that.
We also had two other questions which came in on a related issue to Natalie's question. And they were sent to the chair. One was a suggestion that perhaps those monies might be invested in mental health support for students, with someone noting that there's been a quite startling rise in students accessing counselling services last year, 1,700 people accessing services. And the second suggestion was, or was a question, why can't those monies go to the Union Hardship Fund to help staff who are experiencing financial hardship in exercising their legal right to protest? So those are two suggestions.
I'm sure there are lots of things that we could spend that money on. I could think of a whole range of issues. Mental health is a really important one, and I don't think we should be saying if we need to spend money on mental health, this has to be the money. I think we should find the money to spend on that, and we do, and we have expanded services as much as we can. It's never enough. I know it's never enough. That is actually one of the issues that we're facing here. We're in a situation where, certainly in Welsh universities, we're in a very, very tight period right now. And we'll probably come on to this later, but I'm hoping that as we move through into the new world of the post-Diamond Review, that funding will improve. But the situation for us is really quite constrained at the minute. So it's never going to be enough, whatever we do. I agree that mental health is a good use for that money. I think... as for the Union Hardship Fund, I would have thought that's really a matter for the union rather than the university.
Okay, can I call on Vicky West to ask her question? Vicky's from the School of Business.
Yes, USS was launched in 1975 because the pension benefits in the predecessor scheme, effectively a defined contribution scheme, were too low for members to live on. Vice-Chancellor, you claim that the current pension benefits under USS are unsustainable. If they're unsustainable for a multi-employer organisation which can share and manage risk much more effectively and cheaply than can individuals, are not they more unsustainable when transferred to individuals? Is history repeating itself? Will we be the people that can't afford to live on our pensions?
Well, I very much hope not. I hope there is a good way through this. It's just that at the moment, it's very difficult to see how we can maintain the level of benefits that the defined benefit scheme we now have produces. It's obviously since 2011 that level has already gone down. The last two valuations of the fund that we had resulted, in two things. Contributions have gone up from 14% employers, 16% employers, now to 18%, and similarly it's risen for members as well. And the level of benefits has gone down. In 2014, the final salary element was closed, and that was turned into a career average revalue defined benefit element, and the salary cap was reduced to 55,000. So that all reduced the benefits. The problem is just the affordability of all of this. If there is a way of affording, the sort of level of benefits that we have now, if that could be done, let's say by finding a different way of valuing the scheme that's acceptable to the pensions regulator and that's acceptable to the USS trustee, both of whom obviously have a legal or fiduciary duty to make sure that the risk is manageable in their eyes, not our eyes. then that would be great. And we should do that if that is possible. But it doesn't, at the moment, so far, seem to have transpired to be possible. And the question just then becomes, what do we then do about those escalating costs? Because, as I've said in at least one or two probably emails, the cost would have to go up, or the contributions between members and universities would have to go up by over 11% to keep the level of benefits where they are now. And that is the basic problem that we face. As far as the university is concerned, that would be over 7% rise in our cost base, which would have really major effects. I said that we're in a tight period at the moment. I know the Welsh Government is doing its best to support universities, and they've reformed the student support system and the funding system. That will start coming into force in 2018-19 and will over the subsequent 3 years then start building up, and we hope we'll get somewhere back to the funding levels that we had. But only a couple of years ago we were getting 65 million from HEFCU, and it's now near less than 45. I think we lost 14 million this year. I understand why that is. I haven't complained about it. They're doing their best. They've got huge pressures on them. They've got the health service, other things. It means that in this university, and I cannot speak for Cambridge or Manchester or Glasgow, right? They have to speak for themselves. In this university, what I've been trying to do is to get through this period of real financial constraint without causing a big fuss and demanding a load of money off the Welsh Government, which they haven't got and can't really give us, and they're going to try and get through to the point where they can. And also without doing anything drastic in the university. I don't want to have to take drastic measures to get through this period, and if we have a big rise in costs, that's going to become extremely difficult. It's very tight as it is now. Rob, you want to add something on that?
Only just to add, I think the question that we've all got to address is how do we make sure that we provide the best possible pension going forward with the resources that we've got. And I think everyone will recognise that the environment that we're in at the moment is still very tight, and we've got to try and find a way through that.
I'd like to pass across to Dr. Wingmore from the School of Business as well.
Sorry, I'll do my best here. I'm not very good in speaking. Basically, I think the problem is the actual team for our pension scheme. The method they use is flawed, right? They are ultra conservative, and one practitioner pensioner described it as idiotic. This is not my word. And basically, if you look up the pension regulations, there are two approaches, right? One is what they are using, Gilt Plus. And then because of QE, the interest rate is very low, right? And that really overstates the amount of deficit you have. And secondly, you can also have this alternative, which use the best estimate of the return on assets. Yeah. That is sensible because that is the return that's going to pay off the future liabilities. Yeah. And American pensions, defined benefit pensions in American, they can use that across the Atlantic. So there is this alternative.
No, absolutely, I agree. Quite frankly, if it is acceptable to the pensions regulator and to the USS trustees to go down that route, if that can be done, rather than that, I know what you're saying. You're saying that there's basically this question of a sudden de-risking and having to put all those, the 70% that are now in assets, to put that into gilts, which obviously would have a very low yield, or at least for the scheme, and therefore it's an ultra-conservative, it's an ultra-low-risk way of proceeding. We have never been asked to comment on that, on how the pension scheme is valued or how that's done. If that is a way of solving this, I'm all for it. Why not do it? And I don't know what's stopping it from happening.
Okay, back to Williams for a second.
Sorry, I don't want to take up the time. Okay, the average salary scheme we have is fantastic. I work out that one only costs about 1% above inflation to fund. With that scheme, the contribution rate can come down by about 4 to 6%. right? That means you can only pay about 14%, we can pay only like 6%.
Well, that'd be absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and then I can if you give me a bit of time and the data I need, I can prove, right, with peer reviews and all these scrutinies that the method used by our actual team is flawed. I'll tell you what, if you have all the portfolios consist of gilts, you have larger, higher inflation risk. Why? Because let's say the inflation now is 3%, you buy a gilt that gives you 3% of interest.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the inflation rate is not there. The inflation next year can be higher, right? Whereas stocks, in the long term, secure equities proven to hedge, a good hedge against inflation.
Okay. Sorry, hold on.
So, Vice Chancellor, is there a way that you can bring our local knowledge to bear on these problems? Because that's really one of the things that we would like to see happen.
And then, as you know, we have actually set up a group that you're on, and Karen is going to chair, which is sadly thwarted by the snow last Thursday, but I hope it will meet as soon as possible. And, who wouldn't want that solution? I mean, if it is genuinely the case, and we can show that the methodology is flawed, and that there's a better way of doing it that's within the rules and within the law, and is acceptable to the regulator and the trustee, I can't think of any reason why one wouldn't do that. I mean, it would be great. Yes, I don't know. I honestly do not know why that is.
Please. We're not in a position for shouting or heckling particularly. We've tried to set this up as a respectful environment, okay? So please. I've given my personal assurance to the Vice-Chancellor as the Chair of UCU that if this does become personal and unpleasant, we will leave, okay, and the meeting will be called to a halt, so please.
Okay, we had two questions which rather touched on the questions around the phantom deficit, and for the purpose of time, I'm going to skip past them, but thank you very much to the people who asked those questions regarding the phantom deficit. Two of them both actually concern the question of how you would utilise the expertise from the School of Business around the phantom deficit, and asking you directly whether you felt those experts were wrong. The other suggested that in relation to the huge number of experts across the sector who are saying that the phantom deficit is indeed phantom, in words that a 9-year-old could understand, would you care to revise your original position? Yeah. So the question that's been posed by one of the lecturers is essentially saying that insofar as there's so much out there by experts, by economists, statisticians, saying that the deficit is in fact phantom, it's constructed, in words that 9-year-olds could understand, with videos now pouring out on the internet, and with economists forming very, very large groups saying that this deficit has been constructed and it's a political manifestation rather than something which is actually real. Would you now care to change your position in terms of your position?
My position has been, what I said is it's not really up to me, it's up to the pensions regulator. And I've said that all along. I said that from the beginning when I first sent out an email in November, that the pensions regulator is a key player in this issue. And if it's acceptable to the pensions regulator, and the pensions regulator can be persuaded that this new methodology is, or this alternative methodology is correct, and I can completely see the logic of it. I've read the article. Was it by a professor at UCL or somewhere, or Imperial maybe? On this, and I can absolutely see the sort of financial, economic logic of what's being said there about risk, but that isn't up to me, that's up to the pensions regulator. And, well, I don't know how else to put that.
Sorry, making this a conversation between us now. Yeah. I've heard that it's not up, the pension regulator wasn't the one to choose the valuation, and that was down to the USS trustees, and I don't know.
Okay, I'm not an expert on this. I'm not on that level of no, the pensions regulator wouldn't choose the method of valuation. I think the trustees propose a method of valuation, but if there is another one, if they can be prevailed upon to choose a different one that is acceptable with the pensions regulator and has, would reduce contributions to 14%, I mean, we'd be absolutely delighted with that. And so would all of you, because you all came from that too. So if that can be done, that would be great.
Well, then come out in support of it like other VCs.
I just have. Yeah.
Come out in support of it like other VCs have.
I just have.
You just asked that. Okay, please. Yeah, that's question 6.
No. There are two other related questions just to kind of tie this part up. Two people have asked questions separately asking about the steps you took to investigate whether these changes to the pension were necessary. So, for example, did you contact members of the business school for their opinion and advice? And also the extent to which you consulted with the University Executive Board in compiling a response for the USS survey in September 2017.
No, I didn't contact members of the business school about the detail of that, if was the question.
Yeah.
I think that's quite clear, I didn't. On the response to the USS survey, that was asking the senior management team to respond. And so we gave a senior management team response, and we did discuss it at UEB. Unfortunately, the timing was such that we had to send in the response on the Friday before the UEB on the Monday, but we just simply said to them it's subject to discussion and we might have to come back, but we did discuss it quite extensively, as we always do. I mean, this is actually a regular thing, you know, it's not the only time this has happened. We get these surveys on various matters, and we're asked to respond as a management team, and we do that, and we did on this occasion as well, and we did discuss it at UEB.
Okay, thank you very much. And Andy Williams, Dr. Andy Williams from Journalism.
Vice Chancellor, thank you for coming today. In an open letter to you on the 1st of March, it was put to you that an average 45% pension cut for us is equivalent to a 17% pay cut for staff. Now, your own pay and pensions contributions have risen substantially in recent years, and the Cardiff University website makes clear that your pay is linked to your performance. The same is true of other UK Vice-Chancellors. So my question is this: if you're worth it, why aren't we?
Well, I mean, I do think you're worth it, obviously. I do think you're worth it. And anything that happens with USS will affect me too. I'm in USS as well, so, you know, I'll have the same effect. All right, maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it's true, I am.
There was actually a question about your pension scheme. Someone has asked how much of your USS pension will you lose as a consequence of the decision to discontinue defined benefits in relation to future contributions, Vice Chancellor?
Well, I suppose same as everybody, I think.
It's a bit uneven depending on the salary, how much people are going to lose.
I haven't looked into that.
The question that was also came with a bit of a blurb alongside it, and because I'm not an economist or a pension expert, I don't know, but we've been told that for those who have contributions of 1.8, I can't remember, million banked, essentially,
right,
that it no longer is tax efficient to have their contributions, employer contributions going into that, so then they receive it as cash in lieu.
I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that. Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
So
And
your
I'm
employer
not
contributions continue to go into the USS
Yes,
pot?
it's not tax efficient. I mean, it gets heavily taxed,
Okay.
but that just goes into tax, which is quite right.
Okay, thank you. Okay, related questions. Yeah, it follows on from Andy's question. Junior colleagues or those starting out a career in academia stand to lose the most in their USS supplement retirement. Those with only a few years inside the guaranteed final salary scheme are hit much harder than older academics who will have their long years of service and entitlements in the USS protector. So it's more of a comment really about intergenerational injustice.
I think that's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so then I'm going to call upon Lydia Hayes from Law and Politics.
Hello. Like many other lecturers, my annual salary is about £42,000 a year. If I remain working at Cardiff until I retire, I will have given 28 years continuous service. Being part of USS meant I could expect an income of $15,000 a year in my old age. Expert analysis predicts this income will now fall from $15,000 to £7,100 a year. Vice-Chancellor, do you think this is fair?
No, I don't want. I'm not in any way applauding, I know you're not either, I'm not in any way applauding pensions cuts. I don't want cuts to pensions. What I am concerned with is ensuring that the university can actually afford to fund the best pension possible. And that's the issue we're facing here. It's not that somehow anybody's in favour of cutting pensions or thinks it's a good thing. It's not a good thing, clearly. It's not anything anybody wants. The question is, how do we actually solve this? How do we solve this without a big increase in costs that the university can't afford and that people probably don't have to accept themselves? So that is the issue. And perhaps the valuation methodology is the best way forward on this, because if that really is doable, and what I don't quite understand is why the pensions regulator has not so far, or has so far continuously said that actually the risk is too high, which they have. There was a proposal last autumn by USS, which the pensions regulator basically sent back and saying that actually you're taking too much risk. So that would be something well worth looking at. I mean, we can't go into all now the detail of that, but that'd be something for the group to look into and understand better, I think.
Thank you, Vice-Chancellor. Okay, there's another question which was sent in for the chairs to ask. Delightful thing. This question is, how can it be the case, Vice-Chancellor, that the university can afford to fund a series of prestigious building projects when there is supposedly not enough money to make sure that staff are able to retire on a pension above poverty level?
Yes, it is a good question. Well, the answer is that when you invest in building projects, you're also going to fill those buildings with people who are doing things, and that actually brings a return. So there's then a return.
Go on, keep going, sir.
That then brings a return, and so that you can then cover the costs of the investment. Now, that's different from just a rising costs. Unfortunately, it is. And in fact, Rob can say a little bit about the situation with with our investments at the moment, but actually it's quite helpful to us to be able to invest for the future and make sure that this university is secure and strong into the future, because if it isn't, we all have a really big problem. And we've lost again through the changes that happened, which to the way that universities are funded. We used to get maybe 15 million a year in capital funding. We just don't get that anymore. And if you stop investing, if you just let things slide and don't maintain and refurbish and don't replace buildings or put in new equipment and so on and so forth, if you don't do that, you really do end up on the slide. And previously we would get a grant to do that. We don't get that anymore. So we have to make sure that we can do all this ourselves. And it is, the idea of it is that it is for the benefit of the university, it's for the benefit of students, and it's for the benefit of staff, both research staff and teaching staff. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Rob.
Well, only to say, I think that the university, in order to make sure that it continues to be at the forefront, needs to continue to invest. The investments that we're making are one-off investments as opposed to ongoing investments. And the intent is that those investments would generate returns for the university that would exceed the cost of actually the money that the university has borrowed to pay for those investments.
I suppose the flavour of the question is really, so we're losing this 15 million capex, and then choosing to borrow quite substantial sums of money to put towards 450 million investment programmes into buildings, and yet there are lecturers who are going to be left with £7,000 to live on a year. The question is about what we're investing in people or buildings, and a lot of people are getting the sense that it's a preference towards structures rather than people.
Well, the staffing at this university is we've increased by about 1,000 people, since I came here. We've got 1,000 extra jobs in this university. So what I'm really concerned about is making sure that we stay on that track of keeping people, keeping the university on a reasonable and manageable expansion trajectory, and not getting into a position where we find ourselves in such a difficult financial situation that we simply can't carry on with that. And that's the main thing that's uppermost in my mind. And I understand the detriment of this move on pensions. It's just a question of how do we resolve it. And I have tried to say that all along. Nobody's saying this is a good thing. I'm just repeating myself really.
Given the importance of the staff viewpoint and how people feel, I'd like to call on Dr. Rob Thomas from Biosite to ask the next question, which I think goes to the heart of this.
Thanks. Hello, Colin. I'm one of your senior lecturers. Given that Cardiff University relies very heavily on staff working long hours of unpaid overtime, what are you planning to say or do to maintain the goodwill of your staff and to motivate them to resume providing this unpaid overtime, given that we're in effect being given a massive future pay cut?
Well, look, I am very sorry that we're in this situation. I don't want to be in this situation. Offhand, I think it really depends how things pan out as to what I can do to regain your goodwill. I'm very sorry that I've lost it. I really didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was to be as clear as I could that this is going to be difficult and that there's no easy way through it. And I still don't know what the easy way is. I mean, unless it is via the valuation route. So, I was hoping to do, and obviously failed in this, but I was hoping when I sent my email out at the end of November was to set out these issues and not, as it were, build up hope that this is going to be easy. It is extremely difficult. Because we just have to square this circle of what is affordable and what is viable and what can be, what we can actually achieve. Now, if there is an answer to it all, then it will be wonderful. And nobody more delighted than, well, I expect a lot of people will be more delighted than I would, but I will be as delighted as anybody else if we do find a way through this that doesn't involve big rising costs, that does protect pensions, and that is acceptable to everybody concerned. I mean, I really want that to happen. But I didn't want to start out by saying there's a way of doing this. We can pay a little bit more money, that will solve it. It wasn't true then, and it isn't true now, I don't think.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor. Related to that point is this whole question that has been at the back of many people's minds due to the Freedom of Information Act around the decision, the response to the survey in September 2017. And that's that decision was perhaps made without consultation with your staff and without a full and deep understanding of the antagonism that was going to result from the subsequent UUK position. Would you like to comment on that? Because we would propose that would be an alternative way of going forward in general.
Well, the September 2017 survey was about what can you afford? And we said we really can't afford a rising costs. The proposal didn't come through until December. The September 2017 survey was one thing, and the rising costs, which was about the rising costs. And the only option open to us at that point was to say, well, if you don't want a rising cost, the only thing available is moving to direct contribution. So that's what we said.
I would like to follow it up. So there was also one question in the survey that asked if the contribution cost would rise, would the majority of your USS members leave the scheme? And Cardiff University's answers to that was yes. Now, I haven't been asked, and I don't think anybody else in this room has been asked. So it seems to me that would have been nice or perhaps necessary to consult with staff on what their intentions and their preferences are.
I don't think it was whether the majority would leave the scheme, but did we feel it would lead to an increase in opt-out, was what the words were. And the way we considered that was to look at what people had actually done. So at the moment, there is the option to pay an extra 1%, and only 15% of people have done that. So that seemed then reasonable to deduce from that if only 15% wanted to increase their contributions by 1%, it would be unlikely that people would want to increase their contributions by more than that. And clearly, you know, the best result. Well, yeah, but that was the thought process that we had. So that's the answer to the question.
There will be time at the end of this meeting to open up questions to the floor. All right. So, can I call upon Professor Loredana Bletsi from the School of Modern Languages, please?
Okay. After all this, can you confirm to us, hand on heart, and with the interests of the whole university community in mind, and that includes staff and student, that you are personally convinced by UUK's position on the future of the pension scheme?
What I'm convinced by is that we can't handle a big increase in costs, and the only way at the moment that it looks as if that's achievable is by the direct contribution scheme. Having said that, I'm very pleased, and I've always said there's more time for discussion. If you look back in my emails, I think there was one on the 10th or sometime in February, and before that, you know, I said there's still plenty of time for discussion, and there is. I've never been against further discussions, which you know, I've mentioned it several times, and so you know, UUK and UCU are discussing it probably as we speak, but certainly today, and the auspices of ACAS. And if that then comes up with a solution that's better than the one on offer, that's more acceptable to everybody, I'll be absolutely, I'll obviously welcome that if that is the case. So we'll have to see.
Okay, can I call upon Dr. Stephen Stanley from the School of Social Sciences? Please.
I've been a lecturer in the School of Social Sciences for 15 years. I'm a 40-year-old married man. If the proposed changes to pensions go ahead, my pension will be cut from £20,000 per year to £8,000. University staff pay growth has been fixed around 1% since 2009, reducing our incomes by 17% in real terms. By contrast, in 2014, the highest paid executive in the USS pension scheme received a 50% increase to £900,000 per year. And currently, 2 USS staff earn more than £1 million per year. As our Vice-Chancellor, what will you do to address these gross inequalities? And will you stand up for your staff and fight with us for the pensions that we deserve?
Well, as I've said, if there is a way through this that doesn't involve a big rise in cost for the university, then you know we should embrace it. As for USS and the executive of USS, their conditions will be set by the board. There are, I think, 3 UCU members on the board. And you know, it's really a question of who is going to run. I mean, who do you want running a 65 or 68 billion pound pension scheme, and what are you going to pay them? Well, you can ask your representatives on the board to convey that view, and I can do the same. I mean, I can put that view to your UK members and say that people think it's think that the pay of the executive's too high. I can say that. They're the ones who set it. Sorry, I'm not on the board.
There will be time for questions at the end. Okay, final question is Dr. Gareth Endicott from Geography and Planning.
Hello, Colin. What leadership will you show in the coming weeks to restore trust between you and the university management and the frontline lecturing, research and professional services staff?
Well, I hope that coming along today and taking your questions and doing my best to answer them will help in that. I really don't want to give the impression that I'm working against you. I really don't want to be doing that. I don't feel as if I've been doing that, and I can see that that's what you do feel. The problem is just what is the answer to this? And I keep coming back to, you know, the question that I face is that how do we resolve this without a big rise in costs for the university, because that will cause a whole slew of problems that we really don't want. You know, I mean, 2 or 3% would cost us what, you know, £3-4 million. Now we've gone to an awful lot of trouble. I sat on the Diamond Review and we spent 2.5 years working out how are we going to be able to fund Welsh universities in a way that's, you know, at least a little bit closer to our colleagues in England, and we've managed to get a situation where the Welsh Government said that they would start helping to fund science and engineering teaching, which is much more expensive than you know, other types of teaching. You know, that kind of rise would wipe that out straight away before we even got a chance to help those areas in science and engineering that would really need that. So if there's a way of doing this without having a big rise in costs, I mean ideally any rise in costs, that will be much, much better for us. And that's what I've been trying to achieve. Well, not I've been trying to achieve, I've been arguing for.
Okay, I have one question that was sent to the chair via tweet. Apparently, this morning, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Aberdeen has apologised to his staff in relation to the threats for 100% pay deduction in relation to action short of a strike. Will you also be withdrawing that policy and apologising to staff for the threats of 100% reduction?
I don't think we've made any threats on that basis. I think it's better to see how things pan out. You know, I know that you want the best for your students. You don't want to, you know, if at all possible, none of you here wants to be damaging the interests of students. And I just think it's better to wait and see what happens and just work our way through it. And let's hope we don't get to action short of a strike. Let's hope we can resolve this through discussions that are happening right now.
But action short of a strike is working to contract, right?
Yeah, well, I think it's clearly set out by UCU what action short of a strike was. I think there were 4 items in there.
Okay, we have 18 minutes left on my timer, and I will take some questions from the floor. We're going to start at the back there with my colleague, Tim.
Thanks, Vice Chancellor. Given what you've heard today about the pittance we're to receive in our old age and our wage reductions, can you tell us why anybody would want to work in the academic sector? Why should I encourage my children to work in academia?
Well, I mean, I came into it at a time in the mid-80s when it was incredibly precarious. I mean, I don't know why I did it. I did it because I loved German and really wanted, and I didn't really think about it that much. I just loved the subject, and I loved the idea that I would get to teach German and research it. And I can only look at it from my own point of view. I didn't have a permanent job for the first 5 years. I was in Swansea in the mid-80s. And I don't know what the arguments would have been. It was a crazy thing to do then. Possibly even crazier now. But I hope that people would still feel that same sense. And perhaps they won't. Perhaps the prospects of not having a DB pension, if that's where we end up, might put them off. But don't forget, there are other potential options out there. I mean, the ECU itself, I think, has proposed that why don't we look at moving to a collective defined contribution scheme or defined ambition scheme where all the pension pots are pooled in one, and the idea is that you then aim at a certain level, so you have more of a guarantee, which is used in other countries in Europe, which would require a change in the law if that were to happen. But that's something that we could obviously pick up, and I know your UK are open to that as well. So let's hope that this isn't the last word on it, that there is actually a way of moving to a position which isn't as detrimental as the one that we're facing right now.
Okay. Questions?
So, a lady here, please.
Hello, lady here. Hello, as an undergraduate student in the School of Social Science, I don't want to have to think that my lecturers are going to be penalised for not having carried out the lectures they're supposed to. I don't want them fined or having their salary reduced, and I think all the student body feel the same. Is that going to be the case in Cardiff?
I really think I think the way to handle this is to look at what the issues are in each school, and heads of school I think will deal with those. But I really hope we don't get to that point. I don't want to be at that point, but it's very difficult to say right now how we would react in that situation if we got there. I think it's just very difficult to say that.
Trevor?
Thanks. I think listening to the discussions today, very useful discussions, I think what we're asking for very clearly is for you to urgently request on our behalf that Universities UK carry out a logical revaluation of the USS pension scheme as a multi-employer scheme.
Say it publicly. To the press.
Okay, let him answer, please.
Yeah.
Let him answer, please. Yep.
Is it within the gift of you UK to do that, or is that USS?
I think what we would like is to have a clear commitment from you, to be honest.
Oh yeah, sure. I mean, I said that earlier on.
Yeah, but I think we would like you to produce a public statement the same way that other Vice-Chancellors have.
Well, I don't have any problem with that. I said that earlier on, near the beginning of the meeting.
That's fine. We'll look forward to the public statement today then.
Well, I think I've kind of made it now.
Did you want to speak? Yeah.
Michael Feldman from Modern Languages. Let me first say, Vice Chancellor, very welcome the fact that you are here, that we are having this kind of conversation. We should hang on to exactly this. Now my question relates to the affordability argument. Now it strikes me that you describe the logic of unsustainability very well. That makes you also sympathetic to our demands, but you can't quite get around to it. Now the logic of unsustainability is so well known to us. We have external factors which are beyond our control. We force our hands and we have to tighten our belts. Now this is an endemic logic since 2008 that is even incessant. Now if we are in such a pickle,
So get to the question.
if we square the circle, if we are in this logic of unsustainability, why don't you join us and say, this is now a step too far? We don't cut this pension pot. On the contrary, we start, under your leadership, a new debate about pension schemes that are affordable. Public pension schemes, for example. We don't need to go to Utopia. We can move to Austria, for example, in that respect. Why not shifting the coordinates of that debate and make it then real? In long term,
Yeah, I'll ask Rob to respond in a moment. I mean, there obviously are. I mean, somebody's proposed asking the government to back the USS pension, for example. I mean, that means giving the Treasury your pension fund. Yeah, £65 billion.
Doesn't mean that at all. You know that.
Yeah.
Oh, doesn't it? Okay.
They could underwrite it without taking the money.
Oh, see, underwrite it.
They could underwrite it without taking the money.
Yeah.
The question of whether they would do that or not is another question.
Yeah, I think that is unlikely. I did address that in one of the emails. Can I just say, by the way, that I have on several occasions talked to people. Did I say that at the beginning? I can't remember. Yeah, okay. So it isn't the first time, although it's certainly the most taxing time. So.
Just to sort of follow up on your question, and thank you for that question. I think from a financial sustainability perspective of the university, we obviously have to balance, like all of us have to do in our private lives, our income and our expenditure. And one of the things that I think you've rightly raised is whether we should think about what the next stage of pension should be for staff in universities, and that is one of the options that is on the table at the moment, to actually use the next 3 years between now and the next valuation to actually think through that. And that's not something that's going to happen very quickly. You'll appreciate that these things do take a little bit of time, but that's one of the options that is there and one of the undertakings that's been given.
Yep. Wait a second. One over here first, please.
Hi, I'm Gabrielle. Thank you very much, Professor Waddings, for coming today. I think I just want to make a statement first of all, and that's to say I feel very sad that I've out on strike. I never imagined that in my career I would ever do this at all. I'm an accountant by trade and a business manager now. And what I would really like to see from you is some moral leadership, some real honesty and integrity and engagement and utilisation of the expertise of your staff in this university. That's what I would really like. Secondly, I'd just like to ask a financial question really. Around the monies that are spent on capital investment and infrastructure. Whilst I appreciate that that's capital monies and it's different to revenue, there are still revenue consequences of having nice new shiny buildings. They cost money, they come out of the budget, and they therefore, when we talk about affordability, or you talk about affordability and pension contributions, then the amount of money that's available to be able to increase pension contributions is being taken up in part by these new investments and their revenue consequences. You mentioned that you would assess the value for money that that capital investment makes. How do you do that? How is that reported within the university? Thank you.
I'll just answer the first bit and then pass to Rob. And to say that I was asked, UCU did ask, or maybe the professors group did ask some, I don't know, maybe a month ago to, for us to set up a group and use the expertise, which we actually have done. And, that will meet, I'm sure, as soon as it can. It should have met last Thursday, as I've said. So we are doing that.
You're absolutely right that when you invest in new buildings, you do incur additional revenue costs. And obviously one of the things that we have to do is to balance that with all the other demands that are placed upon the university. But the one thing that does happen with all our capital investments is that all investment cases, before they're approved, have to demonstrate that they are delivering not only a financial return for the university, but also the appropriate academic and research returns that are important for the university. And that's the basis upon which then decisions are made about undertaking investments. And I would just add that we're not just investing in new buildings, we are investing in making sure that some of the facilities that support staff and that support students are also renewed as part of this process.
Trevor Dale from the School of Bioscience. Do you think you got it wrong? Should you have come out much earlier and instead of describing everything as a chance to reassess assumptions, calling for investigations into the funding models and so on, should you not have come out right at the start and said that put the effort in, put the expertise, put the contacts that you have throughout the country to the defence of our pensions, rather than belatedly coming here and saying that you're going to do something now when you see the trouble that's been caused?
Well, perhaps, but I had absolutely no reason to believe that that work hadn't already been done, because don't forget, this has been going on now for many, many years, since 2011. And it just, I said at the time, it seemed to me, if there is a solution out there, surely we'd know about it, because nobody would want to be in this position. We don't want to be in the position, you don't want to be in this position, the students don't want us, probably nor does the country want all this happening. So if there is a solution out there, it's just a question of why it's not been found, and I'm still puzzled.
You're going to go to UCU. So, Marty, are you going to go to UUK and get publicly declare to them that they must find a solution to this in line with the various actuarial assumptions that are out there? The new valuation. Are you going to publicly declare that you're going to go for a new valuation and argue for that now?
No, that's not UUK, that's USS. Yes. Well, the USS have a fiduciary duty, and I would very much hope that if there is another way of resolving this via a revaluation, that will happen. And we've heard that, the proposal that might be the case. What I still don't understand is why, if that is the case, why it hasn't happened. I don't know what advantage there'd be to USS in not doing that, but we'll see.
Will you call upon them to do that, Vice Chancellor?
I think I've already said that several times.
Sorry, I just want to provide some numbers.
Yeah.
In March 2017, the USS report says that the scheme is £12.7 billion deficit. 6 months later, this deficit shrinks by 60% to £5.1 billion. Right? And then they say the best estimate is surplus, 8.3 billion. Use common sense. What are the factors driving our liabilities? Longevity, inflation. Do they change that much in 6 months' time? So I can assure you the valuation is flawed. Just give me a little bit of time, I will show it to you. Thank you.
Okay, I think, if that's the case, USS need to know about it. And you do have 3 representatives on, UCU has 3 representatives on the USS board. They've been close to these discussions the whole time. You can talk to them, you can get them to put the view, you can find out from them what the issue is. It's not just the UK.
Okay, so we have about time for about 3 more
We've got a question from Darth over here as well.
Yeah, over there, sorry.
Good afternoon, Colin. Thank you for coming.
I wondered who that was.
Patrick Sutton from Physics. I'd like to say, I think a lot of the frustration you're sensing in the room comes from a sense among those assembled that you're not being proactive enough in engaging with the problems here. For example, you've been asked several times. You've been asked several times now, will you issue a public statement asking for a reassessment of the situation? You were asked earlier about the income of the people who sit on the USS Pensions Board, and your response was that you're not a UUK representative, but you're the VC of a Russell Group University. You can write to those representatives, you know who they are, you can push them along with fellow VCs. Earlier you had said the Welsh Government had cut funding, and you said you didn't complain. I'd submit it's your job as the Vice Chancellor to complain and to push. us in this room. There's very little we can do. We stand out on the picket lines in freezing cold. We post photos of ourselves wearing silly masks. You know, we tweet. You can do a lot more than we can, and so we're asking you to help us. Thank you.
You know, I mean, I've made my point about evaluation. If we can solve this, and I said this right at the start, if we can solve this by changing or you know, if the methodology is flawed, then it really has to be addressed, because it will be absolutely mad situation to be in this kind of conflict over something that can be resolved relatively easily without any increase in cost, and in fact apparently a reduction in cost. That would be fantastic. And in terms of complaining to the Welsh Government, I complained very loudly and bitterly to them, and you know, caused a whole lot of kerfuffle. When was it? 2 years ago or so, when the proposal was to you know, make big cuts to university budgets, which would have an absolutely devastating effect on this university. 40 million of cuts were fended off. So please, you know, understand that I do fight for this university, and I do fight for you. The reason I didn't complain about this one is because that was all part of an agreement that will move through this period into, you know, a new period of university funding through the Diamond Review. And my main concern there was not to have to take drastic irreversible measures within Cardiff University, which is why we've, much to Rob's chagrin, you know, we had to run a deficit last year, running a bigger deficit this year. Council expects us to get to a break-even position next year. That is not going to be easy. If we do get another rise in costs, it's going to be even more difficult. And you know, my main aim is to get the university through this without dramatic effects. And I think you can guess what those might be, and I don't want to go down that route. And I've really worked very hard to protect this university from that, and don't think there aren't voices telling me I ought to be doing more to save money, to cut the cost base. There are, and I've not done that, and I don't want to do it. So I don't want to be pushed into a position where I have to do it.
Okay, I'm afraid there was time for no more questions. That's an hour, and I think we've taken up enough of your time. As a final comment, we would like you to put more pressure on UUK in a public forum, and to call for more negotiations. I think that's probably our final comment.
Tell them to open up their negotiating aspect. They went into the negotiations saying they weren't prepared to change the current pension system as it was proposed. And they said they weren't prepared to talk to UCU about that. If they're prepared to do that, that's a step forward.
Okay. I want to call this to a halt. I want to thank Colin for coming. I would like you to give a round of applause. I want to thank everybody who made the meeting possible in terms of asking questions and the work beforehand. And I think we should let the Vice Chancellor off the hook for now. Thank you very much.